Okay, I think we should probably get going then. So, as I say, welcome to this is the latest in the Thought Leadership series that we tend to run every couple of weeks. Today, we're focusing on how to cut costs, congestion, and commuting emissions. My name is Mark Hand. I'm a director at Mobilityways, been here for about 15 years now. And my colleague Millie, who's a consultant commutologist. We're going to take you through the sort of context as to why you might want to consider tackling commuting emissions and changing commuting behaviour, and then give you an overview of our approach and just some examples of where we've delivered this across the UK and increasingly overseas indeed. As we go through, please use the Q&A for questions, not the chat. So use the Q&A. We do tend to get a lot of questions on these webinars, which is fantastic. We'll try and cover as many of them as we can at the end of the session. But if you cannot click the anonymous button, it means that if we can't get to your question today, then we will send you a bespoke response very quickly afterwards. So as a reminder, just use the Q&A for questions. Don't press the anonymous button, and then we can get to you either today or afterwards with a response. Before we get into the presentation, we've actually just got a little bit of work for you to do, if that's okay. We really want to understand the reasons why you came to the event today. So we're just going to put up a list, and we're just going to ask you just to tick one. So what is your main area of interest today for joining us on the webinar? The list is there. You should be able to see 7 options there. Please just choose one, and we'll just give you 30 seconds or so to complete this, and we'll calculate the results. And then we'll all have a better understanding of key areas of focus for you, the audience, today. There we go. We've got some results. So net zero, top of the list still at 66%. I mean, that in itself is really interesting. And then we've got 16% lowering congestion, enhancing air quality. So it's funny how you make assumptions, isn't it? With the global challenges we've got and the costs at the pump, we're expecting that saving money on commute costs to be much higher up the list. But that's fantastic. So we're focusing today, therefore, commuting emissions, congestion, air quality as being of main areas of interest. So that's great. Thank you very much for that. Okay. So moving on, we certainly live in a very volatile world, as we all know and are experiencing at the moment. And we've seen global issues impact us incredibly quickly at a local level or a national level. And these global issues tend to add to or deepen national challenges that we already have. That might be recruitment, it might be return to office objectives, congestion, air pollution, and increasingly today, obviously, around cost of living. And staff commuting can actually impact and be relevant to each of those major issues. So next slide, please. So for 25 years, or just over 25 years now, Mobilityways have been working with large local employers, typically in the UK, but now increasingly globally, to help them to measure, reduce, and monitor their commuting emissions. We're a certified B Corp, we're a certified social enterprise, and we are absolutely audit-ready, data-driven in our approach to making recommendations, developing strategies, and so on. And that data, as you can see on the right hand of the slide, importantly is compliant with GHG protocol, technical guidance, SBTi, and ISO 14065 requirements. Next slide, please. So the areas that our clients have tended to focus on with us, and we work with about 250 major employers now, are I'm going to cover over the next few slides. So this one in particular, and clearly relevant to you today, because it received 68% of the vote, is that of net zero. And commuting is often underestimated as part of a footprint for an organisation, and particularly office locations, for example, where the footprint could be as high, and I've seen it at 60 and 70%, whereas most of the focus on those office locations has perhaps been on scope 1 and 2 issues around energy and water and heating and so on. So it's a significant element that we are helping to address for a lot of organisations. And as I mentioned before, it's data-led, and that data being used to support and enhance transport plans and strategies, and really importantly, to inform conversations with third parties, so transport operators, active travel providers, local authorities. And the whole point of this is to try and get a much better alignment between the needs of staff in terms of the commute and the services and options that are available to them to get to and from work. Because changing behaviour in that scenario is much easier and much less like pushing water uphill. And just as an example of that, we did some work, actually, which has won a number of awards now, with one of our clients, which is Prologis, at a logistics park in the Midlands. And through our data work, we established that only 12% of the staff at that site, and there's 10,000 people that work there, had a viable public transport option available to them. And that was causing all sorts of problems, both from an emissions perspective, but also in terms of the occupiers of that park, a lot of major organisations on there being able to recruit and retain staff. So having done the work, we then worked directly with the local authority, transport operators, Prologis and the occupiers, and new services were put into play. And as a result, when DHL went out to market to recruit with its next campaign, they saw a 500% uptick in applicants. And the majority of people that they took on are now travelling sustainably to and from the park. So that's the type of work that we can do. I also wanted to give you just an example within the NHS, because we work with over 40 NHS trusts now. And obviously there are statutory requirements for the NHS to be working on net zero, including the commute. Salford Royal, which is part of Northern Care Alliance, in some work that we did with them, saw a 28% reduction in commuting emissions, largely delivered through a reduction in single occupancy ICE vehicles. Next slide, please. And so the second component that often comes up in conversations with our clients is that of parking and parking challenges. And for nearly every site, we are seeing demand outstrip supply. In our view, the solution is not to build multi-storey car parks or to lease long-term additional spaces. What tends to happen, apart from the costs and obviously the emission implications of that, is that those spaces get full. And within X years, you're back with the same problem once again. So our approach is very much in terms of addressing the demand rather than the supply. And there are other benefits to taking that approach in terms of parking. So, for example, revenue generation. Now, I know there are some people from the NHS joining us today, and the NHS is a great example for this, because there is a trade-off between parking spaces for staff and parking spaces for visitors and patients, not just in terms of revenue, but also, of course, in terms of the visitor and patient experience. And Oxford University Hospital, bottom right-hand side of the slide, have done some research that showed that the revenue generated from a space by patients and visitors is actually 11 times that's generated from a staff space. And the reason for that is just the sheer turnover rate of people using that space that generates that additional revenue. And again, I've seen that a similar number at other trusts. There's also a cost reduction element to this as well. So both in terms of if you are leasing additional spaces, and again, we've worked with many organisations that have been, you can reduce those spaces or eliminate those over time. And then there's also that cost of retention or having to replace staff, which I'm going to come on to on the next slide, which we can move on to now, in fact. So employer of choice, another really important area. And the commute is incredibly impactful in this space. So the UK has the third highest average commute cost in Europe, £67 a month, and that's before the recent spike in fuel prices. It also has one of the longest commutes at an average of 40 minutes. And the commute, therefore, does really play a role in how an employee perceives its employer. That experience of working for somebody doesn't start when you walk through the front door of the office building or the logistics park building. It actually starts from home. And so providing affordable, viable access to work is very important in terms of both recruiting staff and retaining staff. And that's for people perhaps that don't even have cars and that for whom car sharing could be a new option, or it might be access to public transport that's a new or aligned service, or indeed active travel. So I've put in here about physical and affordable access. And what I mean by that is physical access is obviously, are the modes available to staff to get to a site? And if they are they affordable for individuals to actually make that journey? Because if neither of those things are true, then that really does provide a barrier to recruitment, to return to office plans, and indeed site moves. Another aspect of this is well-being, that's physical and mental, and obviously well recorded in terms of the physical and mental benefits of active travel, of walking and cycling. And I saw a lot of stats at an Active Travel Wales event I went to in Cardiff over the last couple of days, just reinforcing how important that is to our health, but also the cost, therefore, for any organisation that's providing private health to its employees. Those costs are going through the roof at the moment. So a focus on making sure that staff are physically and mentally well is important for that reason, and many others, of course. There's also increasing anecdotal evidence of the mental health benefits of shared mobility. So another aspect to bear in mind. And the bottom of the list there, I'm talking about efficient staff allocation. So we're working with a number of FM providers at the moment to try to help them to more efficiently locate their staff at offices as opposed to, or locations as opposed to where they might be. So for example, it could be that I'm driving past a site that I could work at to go and work at another location because the employer doesn't actually realize that there is a more efficient way of doing that. So we're helping those organizations through our data work to achieve more efficient staff allocation. And just popping back to the recruitment point, of course, this is incredibly important for organisations because when you replace an employee in the UK, the cost is around £25,000 to do that. And that's not just the direct costs of recruitment. You're looking at training time, lost productivity, and so on. And that number that PayFit 2025 has come up with is one, again, I've seen in a number of other reports. Next slide, please. So there's plenty of reasons to do this. It's not straightforward, and we'd never pretend it is. Now, in some ways, scopes 1 and 2 are easier, and maybe the reason that most employers have focused on those up to today. Measuring and reducing scope 3 commuter emissions does require employer engagement. This isn't just about capital investment. So engagement with employees, absolutely at the heart of the work that we do. We recognise that a number of organisations at the moment, of course, are struggling with budgets, and particularly for sustainability initiatives. So what's really important when we draw together the business case for our senior teams, when we're trying to get support for these projects, is to lay out the operational benefits that we've talked about, those recruitment, retention, well-being, the parking costs or potential revenue generation, and so on. And to make sure that the senior team are understanding the benefits across the organisation. And yes, in addition to that, we will be reducing emissions, reducing congestion, improving air quality. Commuting does require long-term commitment. The average length of relationship that we have with our clients is just shy of 10 years. And yet, of course, along the route, there are many quick wins. But the ultimate aim for us is the elimination of commuting emissions, and that requires a strategic long-term approach and a consistent commitment over many years. And finally, it may involve changing work policies. So support to make sure that those people getting access, for example, to parking permits are those that need to get access to parking permits. So actually having a look at what options or alternatives they have to travel to work alongside other criteria, but perhaps moving away from this, well, you happen to live within 2 miles, so therefore you don't get a permit, but actually thinking a bit more around what options are available to staff to travel and thinking about permit allocation on that basis. So yes, it's challenging, but if we move on to the next slide, we'll see that actually we do see a whole host of successes. And these are just a few examples of some of the clients that we have worked with. So Sainsbury's DHL, I've mentioned earlier, that 500% increase in job applicants. At Arup, we saw a 35% reduction in single occupancy vehicles in just a few months. At Heathrow, we're seeing lift share saving employees roughly £4 million per year. And at Sage, when we undertook employee engagement on their behalf, we tripled that level of engagement from when they'd done that exercise themselves the year before. So I hope that gives you a reasonable context for the why behind this. I'm going to hand over now to Millie just to take you through and give you an overview of our approach. And again, some more case studies in terms of where we've actually seen some success. Thanks very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. So in practice, how can companies actually achieve their targets, tackle those barriers, and encourage the behaviour change? Behaviour only shifts when both the organisation and its people are moving at the same time. So if one moves without the other, nothing will stick. Our work sits within the middle of these two sides. It's a mix of the clear data, the practical tools, and the human support with it. And we do this through 3 methods. On the employee side, it's all about the app. This is the bit people actually use every day, and it's their one-stop shop for zero carbon commuting. It carries your branding and your tone of voice, so it feels like a natural extension of your organisation. Staff use it to see what's realistic for them, to try out different travel options without risking a bad day, and to track the impact they're making. And that familiarity really matters. Once the app becomes the place people go to for anything to do with their commute, the habits will start to shift. On the employer side, the dashboard gives the live picture, and it's the strategic suite of tools to build into decision-making. It pulls together Commute IQ postcode analysis, the travel survey, your commuter emissions baseline, and activity from your community, meaning leaders and operational teams can see what is happening now, what is changing, and where attention is needed. Decisions stop relying on guesswork. So holding these 2 parts together is the Commutology consultancy. Data on its own does nothing. An app on its own won't do anything, but the change comes from the conversations and the choices in between. Our team works with you to read the data, plan practical steps, and crucially, communicate with staff so they know what is available and why it helps them. We keep the programme moving through a simple cycle. We measure what is happening, we reduce the impact with targeted actions, and we report progress through the dashboard. That's how the impact is achieved. To show what it feels like from the employee side, here's a short walkthrough of the app.
Successful behaviour change to sustainable commuting across your organisation starts with strong employee engagement and buy-in. The Mobilityways app is the unified employee gateway to zero carbon commuting, available to your team on iOS App Store or Google Play Store. With the Mobilityways app, employees can discover more sustainable ways to travel, connect with carpool partners, and earn rewards for making eco-friendly choices. Access to your organization's Mobilityways community is limited exclusively to your employees, with seamless sign-up through your corporate single sign-on. Once logged in, the branding and experience is tailored to your organization. The features available in the app depend on the specific modules your organization subscribes to, ensuring a customized and scalable solution for your sustainability goals. Lift share for work. Facilitate carpooling by matching colleagues based upon shift patterns and home locations. Commute boost. Reward employees for sustainable commuting by creating challenges for public transport, active travel, and carpooling. Personal travel plans highlight the individual sustainable commute options available to each of your team.
So now you've seen the overall experience. Inside the app is the modules that sit within there, and that's what help people change how they travel. Like mentioned, you can run with kind of one module or several. Some organisations choose to start small, others choose to switch all of them on from day one. You can pick what fits your sites. We've got Lift Share for Work, which matches colleagues who live near each other or share similar shift patterns, which makes sharing practical and reduces pressure on parking. We've got Commute Boost, which focuses on rewarding lower carbon commuting. When employees log their journeys in the app, the system logs when a lower carbon option has been taken and rewards can be administered. The rewards are set by the employer and the engine is flexible, so you can run incentives that suit your workforce and keep them going for as long as you like. We've also got personal travel plans within the app. This gives each person a clear view of the realistic routes between home and site. They're powered by real postcodes and timings, so nobody's going to be sent on a fantasy journey. Each module can stand on its own, but together they give staff the options that feel workable. To bring these modules to life, here's a real-world example of lift share in action from an employer who put car sharing at the heart of their strategy.
Lloyds Banking Group started working with Mobilityways in 2022, so we're coming up to 3 years of working together. And we wanted to find a way that our colleagues could find others on their route into the office. And we loved that the app can track the CO2 savings. We made a pledge in 2021 to maintain our travel carbon emissions at 50% of our 2018-19 baseline. For both business travel and commuting, we support our colleagues to consider more sustainable options. We have an ambition to achieve net zero across our own operations by 2030, and that's supported by our commitments to other areas such as energy, carbon, waste, water and nature. Not everybody has easy access to public transport or is able to walk or cycle to the office, and Lift Share is another commuting option for those colleagues to be part of our sustainability journey.
So here at Bristol, we have a good proportion of parking bays reserved for Lift Share users only. By using Mobilityways, we can identify colleagues who are making an active switch to more sustainable commuting methods and personally thank them.
At Lloyds Banking Group, we use the dashboard and reporting tools on a daily basis. They're super helpful for us to understand our CO2 savings and reductions. We can use the improved conversion facility for secure messaging and ask our users to update their journeys on a regular basis. And we can also use it to thank our colleagues for lift sharing to the office. For example, we've done a Halloween trick or treat campaign where we were able to send out coffee vouchers to those colleagues that were authenticating their journeys. We've doubled our journey authentications in the last 12 months due to the support from the Mobilityways team, the data analysis and the fantastic efforts from all of our colleagues that lift share every day.
Before I used Lift Share, I used to just literally drive to work, just me by myself most of the time. And to be honest, that actually after a while made me feel quite guilty. The reason that I switched to using Lift Share is because when I moved to Bristol, the offering here in the office of having so much green parking available right in the office building, it's obviously super convenient. In terms of how much money I save, comfortably I reckon between £50 and £60 a month. I use Lift Share quite a bit. I like to cycle to work as well, so there's quite a good balance there. So when we're coming into the office, we work in different teams. I think that's obviously one of the big benefits is you get an opportunity to be with people who may be in completely different parts of the business. And we just get to catch up on what our respective areas are doing, which is, I guess, a really nice way to collaborate as well on the way in.
So now onto the employer side. How do you actually know what will work for your staff? What will motivate them and what will genuinely make a difference? It all comes back to the data-driven insights on your dashboard, where you can track your progress towards net zero. Your dashboard brings together the Commute IQ findings, your travel survey results, and your commuting emissions baseline. When everything sits in one place, the full picture suddenly makes a bit more sense. You can instantly spot where a small tweak could ease parking pressures, where a reward scheme is starting to shift behaviour, or where a simple bus timetable change would genuinely help people. And if something isn't quite landing, you can see that quickly too. And our consultants are right there with you, helping you turn all of that data into clear, actionable insight that you can actually use. To show what this looks like in practice, I'm going to walk you through a live Commute IQ example and how we've used that with other clients. Perfect. So what you can see here is an employee postcode. Every dot is a person with a routine to protect, childcare to juggle, or a long shift ahead. Commute IQ shows the travel choices that are physically possible for people, even if those choices are not obvious in daily life. The example I'd like to walk you through is of a hospital that was about to lose around 200 car parking spaces during construction. Staff already struggled to park, local roads were clogged easily, and at the time, building more parking was not possible. So the hospital had to reduce demand without making life harder for staff. We started with a survey to understand how people were travelling and what was shaping their choices, and Commute IQ then revealed the art of the possible, so how staff could be getting to work. And the big headline that was discovered was that 93% of the workforce actually had a sustainable commuting option available to them. So what does that look like when you break it down mode by mode? We'll start off by looking at active travel. So if I flick over, so we've got all the postcodes on the screen here, and then I can flick over to the active travel screen. When we look at active travel, when we reviewed the survey alongside the Commute IQ data, the first thing that stood out was the gap between how people said they travelled and what was actually possible based on where they lived. The survey showed that 11% of people walked, but Commute IQ showed that around 30% lived within a mile and a half of the site. So that's the green area that you can see here. That's not just based on as the crow flies, it's based on real life walking routes. So don't worry, we won't be telling you to walk down the side of the M1. But cycling then told us the same story. 7% said that they cycled to work, but Commute IQ showed us that 61% lived within a realistic cycling distance. That's the pink area and the pink isochrome that you can see on the screen. And once we included e-bikes, there was a further 9% of staff who could cycle to work on an e-bike, showing that almost 3/4 of the workforce lived within 12 miles of site. Those numbers were then behind the decision to run an e-bike trial with Dash Rides. 100 members of staff were offered a free month-long trial. There was no cost and no need to commit. It gave people the chance to try something new that they might never have tested otherwise. The hospital also then hosted sessions with the Walk Wheel Cycle Trust, all directly driven by what staff told us in the survey. People said they weren't confident about route safety, bike security, or just cycling in general. So the sessions focused exactly on these points. The aim wasn't to turn everyone into cyclists, but simply to give people an option that felt realistic on the days that suited them. We sent every member of staff a personal travel plan, alongside tailored communications to those living within walking and cycling distance, which then helped people understand the options available to them and gave them the information they needed to feel confident when trying something new. Public transport then showed us a similar pattern. Actual usage was low, with only around 4% of staff currently taking the bus. But when you look at the data, something really interesting actually popped out. 21% of staff had a public transport journey available to them. As you can see on the screen here, that covers a range of journey times. So that's from 15 minutes, which are the green dots, all the way up to kind of just over an hour with the blue and kind of red dots. So the journey times really did vary for staff, showing that there's far more potential for bus usage than the headline number might suggest. But once we dug further into the data, we started to compare public transport journey times to the typical driving time using a 2 times driving benchmark. So for example, if it took me 10 minutes to drive to site, what would that look like in terms of a 20-minute public transport journey? And what we can see here from this public transport comparison is that the problem areas jump out. For example, everyone living over to the west side, there's simply no suitable bus journey for them. The journeys are too long and would not be incomparable to their driving journey. And there's a cluster just north of the town that shows it even more clearly. There was around 765 postcodes within this cluster here, and with no realistic bus route. Many of these people held parking permits, so you can imagine the impact if even a fraction of those trips had a viable alternative. We also spotted an existing route up to the north of the town, all the way up to the coast. That was an existing route, but a big chunk of it had low uptake due to the shift times and the bus timetable not matching up. When we shared this map with the hospital, the council, and the bus operators, together it changed the conversation. Instead of debating the possibilities, everyone could see the gaps on the screen, postcode by postcode. That's then led to 2 constructive outcomes. The first is that work has begun on a potential new route for the unrepresented area to the north of the town. The operator is also now looking at adjusting early morning services to better align with shift patterns up to the north of the coast. Those timetable changes are expected to go live summer this year. And those conversations are still ongoing, but none of these would have moved as quickly without being able to show the data so visually. It made the issue impossible to ignore. And finally, car sharing. So car sharing actually had the strongest opportunity of the whole data set. The survey told us that 7% of staff were already sharing to work, but actually, when we did the postcode analysis and looked at the Commute IQ map, we see something completely different. 91% of staff live within just a mile of another colleague, and 2/3 of those have at least 10 or more colleagues living within that distance of them. That's highlighted by all the green on the screen. So anyone in green on the screen has at least 10 plus car sharing options available to them. Once the hospital saw this laid out visually, the direction was obvious. They launched Lift Share for Work, and they paired it with two strong practical incentives: priority parking for verified sharers and discounted permits for people who share regularly. Both of those choices came directly from staff feedback. People wanted a faster, more reliable commute and clear financial benefit for making the switch. And what's really encouraging is the impact it's already having. The car sharing community isn't just growing, it's delivering tangible benefits. £22,251 has so far been saved by colleagues. That's real personal savings at a time when the cost of living makes every pound count. 16.81 tonnes of CO2 has been avoided, effectively the same as removing several cars from the road for an entire year. And 76,230 miles have been saved off the road. That's the same distance as driving around the Earth 3 times. Every one of those miles is a journey shared instead of the journey driven alone. So what we're seeing here is that it's a win on every level. Staff save money, the hospital reduces pressure on parking, and emissions fall. And these results only happen because the data showed opportunity so clearly and the hospital acted on it. It wasn't necessarily one thing on its own, it was how all the parts worked together. Commute IQ showed us what was possible. The survey explained why people were making the choices they were, and the app gave the staff something they could actually use. And our consultants then helped the hospital turn all of that into a plan that worked on the ground. The dashboard pulled everything together in one place, so instead of waiting a year for an update, the hospital could see progress week by week. But it's important to note that none of this changed overnight. It was small, steady shifts. A few people started to cycle, dozens more sharing once they realised that half their team lived around the corner. And those little changes, when added up, started to ease the pressure on parking for the hospital. So you've now seen what the tools can do, but the tools won't necessarily work on their own. They make an impact when people know about them and that they trust them. That's where our consultancy comes in. We design your survey so it actually produces insights you can use. We can sit with you to interpret the Commute IQ output and the postcode analysis and agree where to focus the efforts. We can engage with councils and local transport operators when the network needs a tweak, and we can help you plan, write, and schedule the messages that go to staff, creating branded posters, flyers, and banners to make sure the message lands. But it's not just that. We bring the human time, the real-world experience of what actually drives behaviour change. We can help you engage your key stakeholders, provide the actionable analysis, pulling out the biggest opportunities for emissions reduction and the quickest wins, and we support the strategy development, helping you build a realistic, evidence-based roadmap for your organisation. In short, we can turn the data into action and the tools into outcomes. Go on to the next slide, please. So once the plan is in place, the communication is then the key. People rarely wake up and suddenly decide to travel differently. It usually takes the right message in the right moment. There are a few moments that really matter. For example, induction. When new starters are forming new habits in the first few weeks, if they hear about travel options early, they're more likely to choose something sustainable before driving becomes an automatic choice. We've got shift changes, which when people's routines change, even just slightly, they're naturally more open to trying a different mode. Parking renewals and permit changes. This is one of the biggest decision points. If someone is already reviewing their permit, that's exactly when they're willing to think about alternatives. And of course, we've got seasonal change. So in autumn and winter, often drive sharing because of fuel costs and darker mornings, so car sharing is a perfect alternative. Whereas spring and summer, we often see more interest in cycling and walking. So you get different opportunities for behaviour change throughout the year. Good comms meet these people in these moments. So it's not always about pushing more messages. It's about dropping the right information in the moments where behaviour is already up for negotiation. To make this all easy, we can provide a full engagement toolkit to support with your communication strategy. as when the travel messages are timed well and stay consistent, that's when you really start to see the shift. With fewer solo drivers, more shared journeys, and more people choosing active modes, it can result in a genuine reduction of demand for parking. The next clip that we're going to show shows how the whole approach fills inside a real workplace. NSERC used the Mobilityways toolkit with our consultancy support. They use travel surveys to show current habits. They use Commuter to see realistic alternatives. LiftShare made sharing easy for them, and Commute Boost rewarded those choosing low carbon modes. The app handled their daily actions, and the dashboard let NSERC track their progress in real time. The result was fewer solo drivers, thousands of car miles removed, and staff were saving money with the options that finally felt practical. So here's a short video to summarise NSERC's success.
NSERC is one of the biggest glass manufacturers. We have about 1,000 employees at Elton. One of our challenges is to reduce the amount of travel into site every day.
A lot of our work is making sure that we reduce our carbon footprint, so Mobilityways is helping us to reduce the commute emissions that are going out.
After running the travel survey, we got a lot of data. It just made us aware of how people travel to work, how ready they are to car share, what their attitudes to electric cars are, and it helped give us a plan for the future. We've been able to introduce our lift share scheme. If you car share with somebody, we pay £1 per journey into work.
And we also have a prize draw, which has really encouraged people to get on the app. So the Commute Boost is targeted at getting our walkers and cyclists involved as well, so that we're able to sustainably incentivise.
We wanted to use it as an attraction tool as well for candidates applying for roles at NSERC. Where the sites are based, they're not the most accessible for public transport, and we found that was a barrier. We explored various different options, but the most effective and most cost-effective way was using the Mobilityways app.
Since we've launched Mobilityways, we've seen a big reduction in miles off the road. There's been 145,000 miles reduced off the road, and that has resulted in £42,000 being saved as well by our people.
At NSERC, we've been able to benchmark our commute emissions using a travel survey. We use that data to receive an A-cell score. First year of using the app, it showed a 6% reduction in single occupancy drivers. I think success for NSERC long term would be having as many people car sharing or using the most environmentally friendly methods to come to work.
And to finish off today's webinar before we jump into a Q&A, we want to hear from you again. So what would encourage you to switch to a more sustainable commute? Whether that's free food and drink, shopping vouchers, whether it's cash like NSERC have been doing with their £1 reward, or a charitable donation, we want to understand what would encourage you to start commuting differently. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so to kind of pop your answers in. I know for me, it would either be the time off, so getting kind of finish early Fridays, or a free coffee will never go amiss either. Perfect. So what I can see so far as well is that actually a lot of you are already up for it. You're already up for switching up your commute, and we've got 47% of people who have said that actually no incentive is needed. So it's really nice to hear. We've also got kind of time off from finishing early, so getting your commuting time back is a similar kind of approach, and that's around 20% of you have highlighted that as an option as well.
Thank you very much, Millie. Just as a reminder, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And if you don't tick the anonymous button, it does mean we can send a bespoke answer to you afterwards if we don't get through all the questions today. I can see they're rolling in, which is fantastic. So we'll answer as many as we can. And I'll just get that open on my screen so I can see what's come in. Okay, so let's kick off with John Carr. So thanks, John. Part of the problem is that people are driving larger, heavier vehicles than they need, the Chelsea tractor syndrome. Has any work been done to persuade staff to go for vehicles better suited to their actual needs, probably both cheaper and more economical to run? In my experience, and I'll hand over to Millie as well, not that I'm aware of. So I think the biggest emphasis from employers at the moment is pushing or encouraging a shift to EVs. And from our perspective, it's working with employers to make sure that any vehicle that comes to site is shared. And ideally, obviously, we're trying to get people to walk, cycle, or take public transport. Perhaps things will change if we see $150 a barrel, then moving to smaller cars, which use less fuel, may be more of encouragement, an incentive to people. But I'm not aware of any actual programs that we've been involved in. But Millie, anything from you?
No, I mean, just to kind of, add to what you've said. So nothing kind of that I'm aware of, but it is really that EV piece and the hybrid piece that we're looking into a lot at the minute. So within a lot of our travel surveys, understanding what the barriers are in terms of EVs for staff, and also kind of understanding when people will look to transition to either an EV or a hybrid. So it's more of a focus on kind of EV and EV infrastructure rather than the size of the vehicle.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay, this one from Bradley. How does Commute IQ work for organisations with multiple sites? Does it fit employees to the closest site? Do you want to pick that one up, Millie?
Yes, so we work with loads of organisations who've got multiple sites. So the way it works is we'd ask for the kind of postcode data that we would analyse for it to be split out into those different sites. So assigning an employee to their main base site, and we'll run their kind of commuting options off their main base site rather than all the sites that they might be kind of visiting.
And just to add a little bit to that, other pieces of work that we've done involve where organisations are looking to relocate and they're considering perhaps 3 different sites at the same time, and we can run that analysis for each of those sites to actually see which is the most accessible. And it's not the only decision factor, of course, when you're looking at a new location, but where you get your staff from is incredibly important to a lot of organisations. So that's just another aspect to that. How do I talk colleagues into taking the bus if it's even one and a half times longer than driving? And I'm just going to connect that to a couple of other questions because I think these are linked. Both of these are anonymous. So how do you encourage people to change to walking or cycling when it's not as convenient as driving? I think we'll just pick up those 2 for now. Millie, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, so it's all about understanding. So there's 2 parts of it. It's about understanding what the kind of the whys are from your employees and what would encourage them. So that's where I've spoken about kind of the travel survey and understanding why people are driving, whether it is a convenience aspect, whether they aren't aware of the bus routes or whether they are aware of the bus routes, for example, and it is that kind of 1.5 times longer. When it is that little bit longer to catch the bus, it's all about kind of reimagining the commute. So for example, when you're driving to the office, if you're stuck in kind of traffic, stuck in congestion, it can actually be quite a stressful journey for some people. Some people don't actually enjoy driving, but it's rethinking that. So yeah, it might take me 20 minutes longer on the bus, for example, but I can sit on the bus, I can read a book on the bus, I can use that time to listen to a podcast without feeling stressed in the car. And it's all about reimagining that kind of commute for people. And it's very similar with active travel. So whether kind of active travel, whether that's walking or cycling. Walking is that little bit easier to encourage people just because there isn't the kind of equipment barrier. That's not to say that is a barrier for everyone. But in terms of active travel, again, it's reimagining it. So if you cycle to work and you have a kind of 20-minute cycle journey, actually that might be your kind of exercise for the day, kind of cycling to and from work, and you don't need to pay for a gym membership on the side. So you're saving yourself money there and also getting kind of the satisfaction from cycling into work. And something that we have been looking at the minute as well is getting people to kind of rank their commute on a scale of 1 to 10. So how satisfied are you with your commute? And what we've seen from numerous kind of employers is that those people who are active travelling are kind of promoting their mode. So they're ranking their mode out of kind of an 8 and 9 out of 10, whereas those who are driving alone are actually more kind of sitting at that 6 kind of mid-level. So actually people who are active travelling are enjoying their commute a lot more, and it's just making sure people are aware of that aspect. I don't know whether you've got anything else to add, Mark?
Yeah, I think at the other end of the spectrum, it's around the policy approach by the organisation, and that's partly going to depend on what is your parking situation. If you have loads of empty spaces and it's free, well, research shows that you're 4 times more likely to drive than you are if that isn't the situation. But if your car park is under pressure and you need to try to reduce the number of people coming to site for that reason, then you might need to make some policy decisions. So if people are within walking and cycling distance and are capable of walking or cycling, then perhaps access to the car park is denied if there are not other criteria that you need to be considering at the same time. So this is both, for me, it's often a carrot stick type thing. It's about encouraging a reimagining, as Millie's described, but there may be some policy work that sits behind that as well. Okay, next question. Great demo, thank you. Thank you, whoever said that. I think this was anonymous. Yes, it was. What are the main ways you are able to communicate these options to staff and then convince them to use them?
So in terms of communication, it very much depends on your workforce and your company. The main ways that we see in terms of kind of quite kind of classic are staff emails, on-site promotions. So whether you've got kind of a stall that actually kind of staff walk past and they can kind of start understanding about different options available to them. One benefit of the Commute IQ analysis is that actually if you can provide postcodes alongside kind of names and email addresses of individuals, we then get that breakdown of 50 people, these people can walk, and these are their email addresses. So we can do that targeted communication, which is something that I kind of spoke about that we did with the hospital. And actually, you know that the right message then is landing with the right people, because there's no point telling people to walk to work if they are living 30 miles away. It's just not going to obviously land because they can't kind of walk. But yeah, so it kind of really does depend. Internet, making sure that people have places to go when they kind of need to find information about their commute. So it's all about making it as easy as possible for staff to kind of find the relevant information. You can kind of look at it in terms of different communications, as in push communications, so communications you push out to staff, and then pull communications. So when staff are going looking for that information, actually that is kind of your internet pages, and when staff are going to look for that information, that's where they'll go. And that's where we can link personal travel plans in as well. Having those available to staff and make it really clear and concise for them to kind of see their journey options is kind of one of the best routes to go down, and just kind of giving it them all on a plate so that they don't have to go digging through bus timetables and so on.
Perfect, thank you. Another anonymous, how does the app work? I think we covered that, but the main question really sounds like there could be problems with data use. So my favorite question. There's a whole range of elements here to do with data. So when we are working on the Commute IQ, for example, the postcode analysis, that data comes from the employer. It is the employer giving us the opportunity to process that data on their behalf, often done under legitimate interest in terms of GDPR, but we will always have conversations with governance teams at employers to make sure that they are comfortable with the way that we are processing the data on their behalf. In the end, it's their data. When it comes down to individuals using the app, it's a privacy-first approach. For example, with Commute Boost, we talked about setting up a commute window. That's up to the individual to do if they choose to do so. And that data about their travel will never be shared with the employer. So we would be able to provide employers with live data on aggregated numbers. 50% are taking up your bus challenge or whatever it might be, but we will not give the information on John Smith's trip from A to B to an employer. So privacy first, working with governance teams. Of course, we're compliant with GDPR, data security, cyber security, etc. It's a big part of our work, but we always do find ways of working partnering with organisations to deliver this on a data-led approach. Millie, anything to add on the data side?
No, I think you've actually covered it all off there, Mark. So nicely
done. Okay, another anonymous. Does the app recognise when someone is using two modes of transport like park and ride? Do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, so with Commute Boost, it does kind of log multimodal journeys. We're aware that kind of, for example, if you're getting the bus, you're most likely walking to the bus stop, catching that bus, and then doing the kind of last bit of walking at the end. So it does log that. There's multiple different kind of settings within it as to when you kind of, like I said, the reward engine is kind of flexible. So whether you want to reward for the longest part of someone's journey or if, as long as part of it's been kind of sustainable. So park and ride, for example, obviously they're driving to the park and ride, but then the latter half is more sustainable. So ultimately, yeah, it does kind of do those different legs of the journey, and it does capture that information.
Okay, fantastic. Sandra, I've only got a part of a question from you, so you might want to send us this again. I've just got guest answer: to use public transport is 3 trains and a bus. So I'm not sure what that was, but if you could send us a question again, or if you were answering something, maybe just give it a little bit more detail. That'd be fantastic. John car commuting is often linked to the school run. Has Mobilityways looked at this interaction? Yes. So from a lift share perspective, if you go on the lift share platform for any community, you can put your starting journey wherever you want. So if you want to start from home, fine. If you want to start from the gym, that's fine too, or the school or the nursery or whatever it might be. And you might be doing things on different days, so you can put multiple journeys on and search for colleagues to share with for each of those. In terms of personal travel plans, once again, you might want to understand how to commute from the gym or the nursery or wherever it might be, not just from home. So we would always set up a portal for an employer that allows staff, whenever they like, at no cost, and it takes about 20 seconds to download a personal travel plan that will show them all of their options from wherever their starting point is. So hopefully that covers that. Millie, anything else?
Yeah, I think the other thing just to bear in mind is that obviously we're aware that people have got kind of caring commitments, childcare commitments, and it just means that they won't necessarily be your first target audience. It's about kind of getting that low-hanging fruit and adopting a culture of, for example, car sharing within a company. And then people who are, for example, doing the school run will kind of see that culture and be more open to it. So they might not necessarily be your first cohort of people kind of switching up their commute, but like Mark said, there's definitely ways for them to do it as well.
Okay, thank you. And Neil, thank you for your question. How easy is it to extract amalgamated data for inclusion in wider company ESG reporting? We work with a number of organisations with multiple sites. We're also doing a project at the moment with the North East Combined Authority, where we're actually working at 32, from memory, locations, 50,000 staff, doing the measure piece so that we can absolutely amalgamate that data, so that we can look at corridors, bus drop-off stops, across a number of organisations rather than just for one. So amalgamating the data is a really important component of what we can do. Millie, from a client perspective, can you think of where we've done some amalgamated data work for one of our clients?
Yeah, so I'm working with an organisation at the minute who have got, I think we've got around 9 sites across the UK, and we've done kind of travel survey and Commute IQ for them. And part of the process we're doing at the minute is they are using that data for reporting. So, for example, in terms of their total commuting emissions, we've given it to them on a site-by-site breakdown. But equally, we have kind of accumulated that up and given it to them on a whole as well, so they can use that different levels for their reporting. And actually using it is quite interesting. It's not necessarily kind of grouping it all together, but actually comparing across sites as well. So seeing which sites have got more active travel potential, more car sharing potential, and so on. It's actually made them really kind of see which sites are more accessible and which ones aren't for staff.
Okay, I'm going to rush through the next couple because we're running out of time. Anonymous, in your surveys, do you ask about the quality, security of bike storage for expensive bikes and the extent to which this may be a barrier to a cycling commute?
So yeah, we definitely ask about kind of bike storage and kind of access to bike storage as well on site. Not necessarily a kind of one question on the security of bike storage, but it's definitely something that's within the survey. And we can kind of alter what's in the survey depending on the different kind of client base. If active travel is a focus, we can look more into kind of the bike security. But what you actually find a lot of the time is that it's the awareness of the bike storage that a lot of staff don't have. They don't necessarily know where it is and how to access it, whether it's kind of got that swipe card access, they don't know how to access it. But I always find it really interesting. We have kind of a question at the end to allow people to kind of leave comments as they wish if they've got any other comments from the survey. And that's often where you find kind of the comments about bike storage and security. And it's always interesting to see it from current cyclists themselves as well, because obviously they're the ones that have been using the storage. So probably had the most kind of constructive feedback on it as well.
Okay. Thank you. Daisy, thank you for your question. How do you deal with staff pushbacks to shifting behaviour as part of your work with organisations? I think we've kind of touched on that in terms of the way this is framed, and I think that's really important. If you go to your employers and you say that we're looking to change behaviour because we've got a parking issue, then I don't think you're going to get a great deal of support. This is very much about trying to enhance the commuting experience for your staff, to save them money, to reduce congestion, to have a better commuting experience, to reduce stress. How many times I've spoken to people that arrive an hour early for their shift to try and find a parking space. That's what this is all about. So we're not trying to push staff to do something. We're trying to support staff to have a better and safer and cheaper commute. And if we can frame it successfully and communicate successfully and potentially incentivize as well, we should be bringing staff with us, not against us. Any other thoughts, Millie?
It's just, yeah, simply all about making sure you don't leave your staff in the dark, essentially, giving them the why and bringing them along the journey with you.
Okay, we've hit 12 o'clock and there's still loads after this. I'm just going to really quickly, because there's a couple of anonymous and we're not going to be able to get back to you. I'm just going to pick those up really quickly. How do you address any safety concerns that staff have reference lift sharing? Do you want to cover that one quickly?
Yeah, so in terms of safety, there's a few different aspects you can kind of cover off. Some staff don't like being picked up directly outside their house, so encourage people to kind of pop their location at the end of the road or somewhere that they feel safe being picked up. I'd always encourage people to either message or meet beforehand. So it's only, you can have a closed community, so it's set just for your staff base only. So you could kind of meet for a coffee at work beforehand if that made you feel more comfortable. But we've also on our website got a whole kind of FAQ section on safety and lift sharing, because it is something that comes up, but we do kind of have the answers for it.
Brilliant. And then we do a 2-day working week in the city offices, totally flexible how this is achieved personally. Does this hinder the real benefits of the product against investment? I think briefly, that really depends on what are your objectives as the employer. Despite the fact it's only 2 days a week, are you trying to reduce the emissions from the commute? If you are, then this will work for you. Everything that we've established since COVID in the way that the app works is about flexibility, and it recognises hybrid working and the flexibility that people need to travel in from different places and so on that we've talked about. Commute Boost works brilliantly for 2 days a week in terms of incentivizing people to travel. And in some ways, if you're asking people to change their behavior for just 2 days rather than 5, it actually can become a bit easier to achieve. So really comes down to what is it you want to achieve as an organization. And yes, the app and the services and the engagement that we offer can still deliver value for money, in my view. Very lastly, because we've passed time, John Carr, and I have to wrap up with this one, don't I? Thank you, John. He says, thanks, very useful insights. Keep up the great work. So I think that's a great note on which to end. Thank you so much all for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll speak again soon, we hope. Cheers. Bye-bye.